Okay, so we're going to make this quick as we can for Thursday, April 26th to wrap up our material. We finished off with Hurricane Katrina. We're finishing up with that. We said that the Bush administration gets a lot of bad response or bad perspective in the response after Katrina occurs with FEMA. FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, failed to anticipate and respond adequately to this crisis. And it made it look very bad because mostly people who were affected were minorities and people who were in poverty. So the response and the abilities to provide for these people after they were all displaced and hurt and lost their property, that's what looks very bad on Bush after the fact because they were not prepared for this massive scale of a problem. So this whole situation looks bad on the state government, federal government, FEMA, as well as the Army Corps of Engineers, because the Army Corps of Engineers also weren't doing a good job of making sure that levees were sound enough not to break in New Orleans. All right. So the last thing is the financial crisis of 07 through 09. The housing boom of 02 through 07 was fueled by risky subprime mortgages and speculators who borrowed to flip properties for quick profit. So the housing boom of 02 to 07 was fueled by risky subprime mortgages, speculators who borrowed to flip proprietors, properties for quick profit. Wall Street firms packaged these high-risk loans into a variety of complex investments and sold them to investors around the world. Investments worth trillions, with a T, trillions of dollars, lost value as loan foreclosures climbed. So basically what was happening is that a lot of regulations were removed back in the 90s under Clinton to where it became easier to get a mortgage in the 2000s. You can get 100% financing. So that means you could walk into a bank and only could afford a $150,000 house, but get like a $400,000 house. And the problem with that, too, is that a lot of times the interest rates weren't set, which means that you would pay interest rates higher and higher as years go by. So lo and behold, when these bills came in, people couldn't afford their mortgages, and so eventually they had to foreclose. Well, because so many people did this, it led to massive amounts of foreclosures, which means these investments became bad by 07. So the real estate bubble burst in 07, 08, and housing prices collapsed. Many banks and financial institutions at home and overseas faced failure as investors panicked. It resulted in a credit crisis because banks couldn't or were too afraid to make loans. At that point, then you had to have like a 20 or 30% down payment. People raised interest rates because they didn't want to make loans. Like, it just hurt the economy as a result too. And so the necessary day-to-day functioning was hurt as a result. Americans also were hit with soaring gas prices at the same time, unrelated to all this. Stock market didn't decline, like it got cut by half, and unemployment rose up to about 10%. So unemployment gets up to about 10% as a result too. In 08, the federal government issued $170 billion in a stimulus package, and took over some institutions like Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. So in 08, the federal government under Bush with a Democratic Congress issued $170 billion in stimulus package money and took over institutions like Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. Large banks like the Lehman Brothers filed for bankruptcy, and this led to Bush asking Congress for bailout money for businesses and banks. So here, this is what you really need to know for a test. The government response to all this. Don't worry about all the details about how this all happened, but whenever all these businesses begin to fail in 08, the government's response is to ask for large amounts of money that we call bailouts. Because here's your two options. These companies did bad practices, they abused the system, and you can let them fail. Let them fail, and then they get taught the lesson, right? Their company goes under, but then all their employees also lose their jobs, which means all those people are out of a job now, don't have money, which means people can't buy stuff, which means that other companies struggle, and the recession could get a whole lot worse, even Great Depression levels. So instead, the government decides to give massive bailouts in 08 to help keep companies like Lehman Brothers or like Chrysler and GM or whatever other massive companies that were struggling afloat. That way, they don't go under. So yes, you're rewarding bad behavior, but you're also keeping those people in jobs, which makes the economy not get as bad. So Bush gets a lot of criticism by 08. So this is why Bush gets such a bad rap by 2008, because he has the two wars that look like they're going nowhere and become more and more unpopular. And then Also in '08, you have this major crisis, and we give massive bailouts to these companies, which looks like will never get paid back, which eventually they do get paid back. So all that makes him have like a 20-something% approval rating whenever he leaves office. Suspected causes included low interest rates from the federal government, from the Federal Reserve, and the political atmosphere of low regulation. So since the 90s, because of low regulation and low interest rates from the Fed, that's all considered to be the reasons why you have this this crisis. But we issue like $700 billion in bailout money, which dramatically, obviously, adds to the national debt and deficit spending, which is also Bush gets criticized for. So that's it for Bush, and we're not going to Obama. We're only going to address Obama's first term. That's all you have to know for the EOC, and that's where we're going to stop. But of course, Obama does serve 8 years. So in 2008, the favorite to win the nomination was Senator Hillary Clinton, but she lost to a new rising upcomer, Senator Barack Obama, who was the first African American to win a majority party nomination for president. He led a masterful campaign. He was a very gifted speaker and had a lot of charisma. Republicans picked John McCain, a senator from Arizona, a Vietnam veteran who targeted undecided voters. But Republicans were not going to get a lot of help because of Bush being blamed for the wars and the bailout stuff, and so Republicans had a steep hill to climb in winning that election. Obama's message of change and hope and his grassroots, well-funded campaign led him to win. So he goes on to become the first African-American president as well, too.